Hey, what is it, day 12? Welcome along to This Much Is True, a little project of mine, podcast-wise, for 90 days. My name is Mark Manning. Somebody has to be. How are you getting on? I hope you're having a really good weekend. And if nothing else, you have your feet put up, you might be having a glass of wine, which I'm not going to be, because I'm on the dry January, and enjoying yourself. I've just come in like I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed from a nice walk out around Dublin City with my beloved wife. Today I want to talk to you about strange and weird things that I've happened about or I got to know about. And let's jump right in. By the way, if you do need to contact me, This Much Is True at protonmail.com. I want to hear it. If you want to go back on some of the old episodes and you find something that resonates with you, it's no problem. Don't be afraid to reinstate it as an issue, and we'll talk about it here. If anything lights your fire tonight, talk to me here as well. Love to hear from you. Okay, comments below, but it would be great if you use the protonmail.com address, because it's better for me. Now, things that have happened in my life that are weird, and weird experiences. The first, I will take you back to the 1970s. As a boy, my father used to bring me up to a place, and my sister, if we wanted, on Sunday evenings. He'd either go to the sea. This is when people drove and didn't just look at mobile phones. Go for a Sunday drive. Or he'd bring us to the hills. And in the Dublin Hills, there's a really historic place called the Hellfire Club. And all kinds of skullduggery revolves around its history. It was a kind of a play place for the rich, idle aristocracy. And all kinds of black magic rumours and strange things and bodies laid out around the place. Plus it's built actually on a megalithic tomb as well, using the stone from Same, which was transgression apparently of the gods. So weird things happen. It's right up at the top of the hill. It's about 300 feet up, and it's weird. But anyway, it's not so scary during the day. You'll see a link below as to what it's like at night. Fast forward the video a little bit, because I talk so much, and you'll see me there at night with the wind blowing in my hair. 26th of November, I think it was 2021. Stephen, my friend, and I went up there at night with a camera. So have a look at that. Anywho, it wasn't so scary during the day. And I think it was a wintry day we were up there. My father and my sister, and we just came down, getting back into our car. But I always remember, I just saw this mother, I'd say, or a carer, but probably a mother. And she had this boy who looked very... God love him, he may have been mentally ill. He just didn't look well. And his face was like a haunted face. I haven't anything else really to imbibe with you other than it etched in my memory, and etched on his face was just... It looked harrowing. To me, it looked like someone who was suffering and was going to suffer for the rest of their life, bonded to someone who was suffering with them as a burden, but a labour of love. They used to say in Ireland, if you had a child that was not mentally right, it was a gift from God, you know, like a Down syndrome or whatever. It was a gift from God. No, it's not a gift from God. The parents' love, of course, is not in question, but by God do people suffer because they become full-time carers. They learn to cope, but nobody can ever say that it's a gift. No, it's a challenge from God. And on that face I saw nothing. You know, I'm not even being dramatic. I can just say it touched me, so much so I'm talking about it 40 years later. And on the same kind of subject, when I was in sales with Rank Xerox back in the 80s, some of the guys that I worked with, my fellow reps, they had country patches. They were country guys anyway, so they'd relate better with the locals, so it was thought, it was the thinking. Some of them were out in the Midlands or the far west of the country. And we'd come in to Dublin, we'd all gather for meetings on Friday. And one day these two guys came in. They were contemporaries of mine. They were only in their early 20s. College students originally, I think. And but they were sales reps now, so they were suited and booted. But they were They didn't look great. And I said, hey guys, how's it going? And I said, oh Jesus. He said, we were out today and we were blitzing. In other words, they were knocking doors, trying to dig up leads and prospects and business. And they ended up in some institution, a convent, I think, out in the Midlands, somewhere that was remote. And as they were passing through to talk to the office administrator or whoever, they saw a guy being led along within the cloisters, or the walls, the walled areas. Obviously it was only getting out for exercise, because this person was freakish to look at. They described him as being almost alien, gangly, wafer thin, and they said, you know, like the neck was almost like, not as big as, but you know that kind of dinosaur-y Loch Ness monster look where it's really thin. I wish to God I had a thin neck. But anywho, like a thin, tubular neck. And they said the face was oval, and they described it as being pale, almost alien-like, and the consistency of a billiard ball or a pool ball. I always remember them saying that. So this was some unfortunate who couldn't, he was like an elephant man type thing. He couldn't, it would discommode or disturb people to see him. So he'd get these little walks once or twice a day in relative privacy with a carer. And you think, God, you'd be giving out about stuff like first world problems. And these are people whose minds are far from first world problems. So that was weird. The other thing, well, my ghost story, I'm not going to go there because it's well documented. I saw an apparition as a child. If you want to look at some of the other podcasts, you might come across it under paranormal. I won't go there because I've told it too often. But another bizarre thing that happened to me is, again, as a child, we used to go on holidays, staycations if you like. There was no Spain for us. We'd go to the west of Ireland, or in this case, a place called Roscommon, which is beautiful. It's a beautiful county. This is kind of up in the northwest of the country, I think. It's in around that area anyway. And the place we'd go to was called Lough Key Forest Park. As its name suggests, it was a forest-ish. And it had a tower in it. I remember the tower, and it had beautiful lakes and scenic walks. And I think we had a caravan in it. Anyway, you had to go and, here's a word for you, ablutions. Anyone remember ablutions? You have to go every morning to do your ablutions, i.e. brush your teeth, wash your face, zhoosh yourself up, have a shower, have a shit, whatever. Sorry, I had to lower the tone, didn't I? And I was walking across, probably in my little shorts, and on the way, which is only like 10 minutes from the caravan, to this blockhouse, this wash house, and I saw a dead rabbit. A dead Mr. Bunny rabbit. And I looked at it, and it was clean. It was like it was freshly killed. Not a mark on it. Thought no more of it. Went, brushed my teeth, combed my hair, washed up. Came back the same way, retracing my steps about 10-15 minutes later. And I am not joking you. The head was removed. It was clean gone, forensically, surgically removed. And there wasn't, sorry if you're eating, there was no big pool of blood or anything like that. It was just, you know, like you hear about animal mutilations with UFOs and stuff where the cut is just clean. The head was just, the rabbit had lost the head. Anyway, it was gone. That was weird. Another thing, I was on holidays a few years back, 2016 I think. Italy is like a home from home for our family. We regularly vacation in Italy. We love the Dolce Vita. And we were down towards the Amalfi Coast, probably, I'm trying to think of the name, Saragossa or somewhere. It's something, it sounds like that. And I was in this little kind of communal library one day, and I picked up a book, and the book had been written by a guy from Northern Ireland. And he had inscribed the book, he'd signed his name, and it was a little gift to the staff or anyone who cared to pick it up in the library. And he'd been vacating in the same spot for years. So this was his little thank you. But he'd written a book, and the subject was bicycling in Ireland in the 1950s and 60s. And he was relating about a club that he and his friends had set up and all the adventures they had as they went around Ireland. And he described where one night they pitched up tent in County Cork. And it was in a remote, out of the way place in a field. And he said about 2:30 in the morning, the air was filled with the noise of children playing. And he could hear skipping and jumping and scampering around the tent. And him and his friends, the first thing that came to their minds is, let's get out of here. The bikes are being stolen. Let's get them. Or nicked, as we say in Ireland. So their priority was to save their bicycles. So they all got out of the tent, and you can probably guess, there was nobody. And they heard the noise on the wind of the children, but they looked, and there was no habitation around at all. There was no houses or cottages, but they could hear the kids. And they said in the book, he said they went back some years later and pitched up in the same place, but at that point there had been a housing estate built a few hundred yards down the way. But they were in the same area, and that phenomenon did not happen again. So you hear in Ireland like stories about the fairies and the little people, but I think it could be like the following situation I'm going to describe to you. And that is sound waves, audio phenomena. Do. I can't help but say that every time I say phenomena. Do. I've done it again. You have to be a certain age. Do you know who wrote that song, actually? You won't get this, any of you musos. Giorgio Moroder. He of the disco fame, I Feel Love. Anyway, I digress. So I had this book, and I was reading it in the 70s. My parents were great. He used to get me stuff I was interested in. But I always remember there was a story in this book about strange happenings. And it related to a NATO exercise. You know those guys? They're pushing the envelope at the moment. But anyway, NATO had a raison d'etre at the time, which was the Cold War and keeping the Russians at bay. So they would have these joint exercises in areas as diverse as France and Germany and Belgium and what have you. And it was a British tank crew, probably Scorpion tanks around then, and they were co-maneuvering on exercise, if you like, with the US forces. And at one point, their radio operator's headset filled with garbled German, guttural German, what other kind is there? And none of these guys knew what was going on. They're saying, we're not exercising with the Germans. We're with the Yanks. What's going on, mate? You know, God blimey. But one of them spoke German, and he was listening, and he said, this is World War II. These are SS or Wehrmacht. These are World War II communications. So the theory is, I think they were in a valley, that the sound waves just get cut. And this was like decades later, like 30 plus years later. The sound gets recycled or just bounces under certain atmospheric conditions. And that perhaps was the case of the guy down in Cork, where perhaps there had been habitation there back in pre-famine times, and the children's joy and fun and laughter was still there all those years later. Interestingly enough, I tried to contact that man when I got back. He was in his autumn years, or winter years probably, and I kind of got him on email, And he was going to do a podcast with me. Now, either somebody advised him or he got cold feet. And he even kind of backtracked, saying, oh, well, I was young and it could have been. And he'd also had another story about a banshee, the Irish phenomenon that is same. And by the way, have a look down below as well. I'll put a link into a story about banshee, a true one from my late mother, Emily. Have a look at it. I do talk a lot, but, you know, fast forward if you want and you'll get into the thing. Do look at those links. I'm not putting them there for fun. And by the way, contact me. thismuchistrue@protonmail.com. I'd be very, very interested to hear from you. Otherwise, I'm talking to myself, a bit like those kids wasting their sweetness on the air, on the desert air, which reminds me of another story. I got to know a guy through my audiobook work, and he was based still is, in Arizona. Lovely guy. And he told me he pitched up a tent one night in the middle of the Arizonan desert. And during the night, he heard what he described as water, or whoosh, this noise all around. And, all around him. He was on his own at night. And this was the middle of the night, and this super surround sound of this noise. And he got out of the tent, and he had the torch, and he was flashing it around, thinking, is it animals? He said it almost sounded too like buffalo. He said it was that rumbly noise, but there was nobody to be seen or anything. So that was weird. Again, back to my own life. My uncle was a Christian brother, and they're a kind of religious order, but they're educators. And he was quite elderly. He was my father's brother. And anyway, he got old and he started to go downhill. And he was in like a little convent-y type place, or for Christian brothers, for old folks home type thing. And I remember when he died, at one point anyway, I was there, and certainly it was really weird because they were lined up on either side like a guard of honor, his fellow Christian brothers, and they were all states of old age and wheelchairs, and it was almost like they're seeing one of their own off, which was the case. But they knew that death wasn't far from them either. And when I got the news of it, I think it was texted to me that he'd passed away. I was on a radio station up, by the way, if you're listening from Dublin, where that atrocity recently, where the children were stabbed, right there it happened outside the building. I was in a radio station there, and I got the dart back here to Booterstown. And I came up into my house. I think there was nobody around at the time. My wife and kids were out. And I was going to get something in my bedroom. And as I passed the bottom of the bed, I got the distinct waft of like a bouquet of roses. Really strong smell of roses. On my life, that happened. I told my father about it, my late father, and he was quite pleased. I think it's a phenomenon that follows kind of saintly or holy people around. When a holy person dies, and he would have been as saintly as I'd say my father was, who was religious, but in the loveliest possible way. He lived his Christianity. He didn't lecture people on it like certain radio stations I used to be on. He didn't pontificate. He just was living the example of Christ by being generous and kind and helpful to people. Anyway, they were peas in a pod, these two, and he was kind of pleased when I told him that. That certainly happened. More recently, I was standing on the studio steps here. I call it studio. It's a converted log cabin. And this was only about, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks ago. And I do, of course I believe in UFOs. Absolutely. You'd be bloody stupid, or not to believe there is no other form of life out there, given the infinitesimal amount of planets and galaxies and everything else that's out there. You know, you're mad if you don't believe it. Yeah, you know, you can do all the little green man thing you want, green men, and but no, there has to be. But that said, I've never seen one. But what I did see only recently was I was looking up at the sky. I was going out to get a cup of coffee or whatever, little courtyard here between the house and studio. And I was looking at the sky and I saw, and it wouldn't be the first time, I looked way up, and to me it was, I could barely make it out. But I said, oh, that's a private jet. Because as you probably know, they fly that bit higher than commercial aircraft. They can be at, I think, 40,000 feet or 50,000 feet even, I think. But I could I could see it was metal, or it looked metal. And that's fine, but normally they're going in a straight line. Like the jet, if you look up at a jet, you see the contrail right behind the jet. But it maneuvered different. It seemed to, everyone does this, don't they? But it seemed to go across the sky but spiral a bit. And for once, not that you would have seen much, I didn't have my camera phone with me. And well, I was probably in here, but I thought I'm going to miss it because I could barely see it. I said, by the time I go in and get this, it'll be gone. But I watched it. And it seemed to, now in aviation terms, it probably went a mile or two across the sky. But it didn't keep going towards England. It seemed to go up and around that I could make out. I don't know what that was. I know they have a new word these days. Is unidentified aerial phenomenon? Is that it? Or don't know. But that certainly happened to me. Can I think of anything else before I go? Well, it's probably enough for tonight. Keep an eye on the links below. It really takes two to tango. So again, I ask that you make contact with me either through the comments or thismuchistrue@protonmail.com. Hello to Tara and hello to Nigel, if you're watching, the old reliables. Be in touch with you all shortly. Take care, 'cause I care.